being here today. And so thanks all participants for being here today, for showing interest in Centrinno's activities. It is a great honor and pleasure to introduce you and to start this journey together. We have experts from all over the world, literally, and therefore is this beyond exciting to start this journey together. And thank you all for being here today. There's been a small change in the agenda. Pietro, who was supposed to introduce us to this workshop, had a small incident, but is actually good. Is following us behind the scenes, and you have the pleasure to meet him for the next focus group as well. Then I will, well, just as a matter of information for you to know, the meeting is being recorded. And then I think we can start with a bit of content. I will introduce you to Centrinno, since it's the first event. I will introduce you to the project and to the focus group activities, and also an overview of the agenda. The presentation is only to give the coordinates of the project, because then we will dive into its details throughout our 5 events together. Thanks for the slide. An overview. So Centrinno is in a Horizon 2020 EU research project. It is set in a new industrial revolution that puts cities at the core of a sustainable transformation. It is a very big consortium encompassing many cities across Europe. The municipality of Milan is coordinating, but we have 9 pilot cities, 26 partners, and 10 countries involved. And we are all working towards finding innovative approaches to urban regeneration of industrial heritage in historical urban centers. So the vision, the scope of the project is to envision and a rethinking of the challenges, to address the challenges of our time, especially ecological challenges. So this means rethinking the way cities govern their material resources. To do this, we put cities as at the core of the transformation. So we want to boost a diverse, inclusive, and innovative urban economy. And we want to do it through with a social inclusion approach and through craftsmanship, and with a special dedication to culture and heritage, which we'll be focusing on today, especially. And heritage is seen in Centrinno as a catalyst for innovation and social inclusion, and heritage will drive new socioeconomic and sustainable identities for old industrial sites in cities. So I think we can move to the next slide. So yeah, Centrinno is all about developing creative hubs for experimentation and testing new innovative strategies and approaches. But we do that along a common framework of 5 key concepts, which include circularity. Well, we should start from heritage as today's topic. Starting from heritage, which helps us to design from past to the future usage of historical and industrial site. Another key concept is social inclusion, as mentioned, circularity, and vocational training. And all these concepts find their synthesis and their flourishment in the Fab City Hubs, which embody the exploration and the prototyping in the urban space. So there will be really the hubs of where all urban regeneration processes happen in Centrinno, these Fab City Hubs. And this is a bit to give an overview of Centrinno project, but as I said, we will have the chance to dive deep into each of these key concepts and especially into the work on the ground of Centrinno throughout this focus group. And I will shortly to introduce you now to the focus group. If you can have, we can have, yes. So we decided to have this, to initiate this focus group with you, with experts on these topics. First and foremost, to disseminate Centrinno activities and results, but also very important to receive your feedback and inputs on our activities and tools. They will serve as a validation, but also improvement towards the last year of the project. But we also aim to inspire external stakeholders in reflecting and maybe in future adoption of Centrinno approaches, or just learning from, for us, it's also important to learn from other project experiences on our key topics, so to have this mutual exchange. And why not, it can also be the roots or a base room for setting future potential synergies with across the globe. And for this focus group, we have 41 members selected with a very good variety of representation, from Fab Labs to local authorities, NGOs, private companies, and university and research institutes. And then I will present you the agenda for today before leaving the floor to my colleagues. And so we'll start with the concept of heritage today and emotional networking. The Rijnwaard Academy in Amsterdam will give a super interesting presentation about how we do it in Centrinno and our approach to heritage. And then we will go to the ground with the pilot stories. Today we have the pleasure to listen Copenhagen and Tallinn experiences. After that, we'll have a short Q&A session and coffee break. So be prepared with coffee as well. And then we will start collaborative discussion in breakout rooms, but we will tell you more about it later. For now, I will just pass my word to Esther, and she will introduce us to the concept of heritage and how it is applied in Centrinno. Please, Esther, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Flavio, and thank you, Pietro, also for preparing everything. I'm here with my colleagues. I'm Hester Dibbits from the Rijnwaard Academy in Amsterdam, and I'm here with my colleague Jonathan Evenzohaar from the Rijnwaard, and Harry Reddick, also Rijnwaard Academy. And we are very, very happy to dive into the concept of heritage with you all. We are a super big consortium, and I can imagine that as we have all different sort of feelings and ideas about heritage and working with heritage, the same will be with us as members of the focus group. So we are very eager and curious to hear how you think we could work with heritage in dealing with all the challenges we are facing today in the world. What we will do, we have our presentation first will consist of a bit of reflection on the promises and expectations. What did we promise as Centrinno, as a group to the EU also, and how did we start to work together? Then we will dive into our approach. We will share with you some of our methods and tools, the tools we work with and on, the tools that we develop in the project of Centrinno. And after that, indeed, as Flavio said, there will be 2 case studies that even more sort of share some practical findings and experiences in working with the concept of heritage on the sites. 9 pilot sites, 9 pilot teams. And it's really, I'm really excited that we have these 2 pilot teams today presenting their work. So the promises, and expectations, and here is a wide slide. But we promised, so to say, I go ahead. Yeah, as Flavia already said, that there would be, in the end, that we would contribute to develop new centralities in industrial areas, former industrial areas, as engines for innovation and urban transformation. That is quite a lot, and that already sort of is quite challenging to accomplish this in 4 years. And then when it comes to the notion of heritage, there is this idea that indeed these historic urban areas that sometimes have been abandoned and already reused as areas, empty buildings that are no longer empty, but indeed sort of the historic urban areas, that they might develop into hubs of entrepreneurship and social and cultural innovation. And by transforming them into these hubs, reversing trends of abandonment of these sites. These were the promises we started the project with, and this is also what is expected from us. Now, how can we work on this and how to do it? First of all, there are the physical traces from the industrial past, and these can function. That was the claim, or that is what we hope for, that they function as a catalyst for an inclusive, sustainable future. The question is then, how? We work in CENTRINNO together on possible scenarios for interaction with these abandoned sites in line with our vision and mission. But our vision and mission is also something that we wanted to develop bottom up with people, with us as consortium members, but also the people living on these sites, working on these sites. So really a diverse group of people. And we did not want to just replicate the past, but really bring change and contribute to what you may call the regeneration of these sites. So we were from the start aware that being there as a consortium and working with the pilot teams, that we have really, we all should be aware of the possibility that we also could do harm when we do an intervention and when we really intervene in daily life. Now, the first thing that we sort of noticed that was challenging for us is that then I mean also the Rijnwaard team coming from a heritage background and thinking, yes, let's work with heritage, that especially when the buildings are concerned, the physical traces from the past, that it is not self-evident that the people working and living on the site, that they, on a daily level, engaged, that they are engaged with the building or old buildings or other traces from the past as objects of heritage. That is not a given in itself. And this is important to keep in mind also during our whole presentation of today and the discussion we may have about the notion of heritage, that heritage can mean many things for many people. And it is not sort of self-evident that people immediately think of these former industrial buildings as items of heritage. So then our question was, how can ethnographic methods with a heritage focus demonstrate that new interactions, demonstrate new interactions, or can demonstrate interactions on the site and create new interpretations that stimulate a sustainable transition. And this might be a sort of more theoretical question, but as the team of the Rijnwaard Academy working on heritage, we thought it is really important in Centrinno to critically reflect on how ethnographic methods, how stimulating interactions with people and with things and with all the traces from the past really can bring a new way of looking and approaching these sites, and in that manner stimulate these sustainable transitions that we all desire, the transition towards more sustainable, inclusive futures. So, questions. And now I will briefly guide you through the methods, the tools we started to work on in Centrinno, and while working with the pilot teams and also with other people, stakeholders involved, also developing these methods. And we are very curious also to hear later on during this meeting how maybe these methods that we are working with, how they relate to methods that you apply in your everyday practice. So the first is that we, in every action and everything we, every discussion we have, we keep focusing on the fact that heritage as a concept is something that we have to critically reflect on. And that is not self-evident, that it has the same connotation for everybody. So what we say is that heritage first should be approached and considered as a label. It is a value. It is something that is not given, but it is a value added in interaction between people and things and on a daily level. So items that are valued as heritage, items that people call heritage, all buildings, traditions, practices, ideas, traces from the past, in the present, items that are valued as heritage are not per se something which should be kept. Because the question is then, who decides? It is also, heritage is also not per se something which you could say society wants to keep, because then the question is, who is society? It's very easy, heritage, the things we want to keep. Who is the we? So even then the discussion starts, who is the we if we say something we want to keep? Even we could say something Europe wants to keep. But then the question is, who is Europe? So thinking about heritage, it comes with many questions, and especially since so many people are talking about heritage as if we all know what it means, we have to be critical on how we use the term, the notion, and how we work with this value label, because, as I said earlier, it can also do harm if we not make this explicit, because people have different feelings in relation to all these buildings, these traditions, these practices. For some people, it is about physical traces from the past, and for other people, it is more about a feeling or a longing or an item, a practice. So this is where we started, and this is the reason why we said in Centrinno, we really want to pay attention to all these voices, positions, interests, forms of knowledge that easily might be overlooked, that might be forgotten, that have not been acknowledged before, dealing with formerly industrial sites. We could even say industrial sites in everyday current society might be contested sites. just like colonial sites, colonial objects that have become very contested nowadays. The same could count for industrial sites, because people also have maybe painful memories. There might be voices that have not been heard. So the first method that we brought in is, and that we also sort of shared with people, with the consortium members, is these are the methods that relate to ethnographic field work. Go outside, talk to people, hang around, use your senses, record sight, sound, smells, really spend time to connect with people, to the objects, with voices that have been easily forgotten, overlooked. What different feelings are present when we enter the site? Speaking about these feelings, and this is the second method that we introduced, and that for CENTRINNO is very important, is the method of emotion networking. And that is a method developed by Rijnwaard Academy in collaboration with Imagine IC, that is an Amsterdam-based heritage institution. And let me very briefly explain how it works, emotion networking. It is a very simple method. There is an item of heritage in the middle, or an item that could become heritage. That is the focus of a conversation between a group of 8 or 10 people. They usually are invited because they have diverse interests, diverse feelings. They come together, sit around a table, and they start a sort of investigation of where they would position themselves in relation to this item. It can be a building, a tradition. What are their feelings? Not necessarily what are their interests in the first place, but how do they feel about the items? It can be something that is considered usually as waste. It can be, for example, wool, or a simple sort of bunch of stones, or old shoes, or the craft of a shoemaker. It can be an item, it can be anything. The conversation starts when people position themselves on a mind map, and then they start exchanging how they feel about it. And in the conversation, maybe feelings, positions may start to change or not, but something happens. And what develops in the conversation is a sort of a network. And this network is made visible because people start drawing lines, and they can talk about how does this network look like, and how did our positions change, how did our feelings change in the interaction. Theoretically, there is a sort of underpinning. It is inspired by actor network theories. I won't go into that, because now I want to really focus on how it has been used by the pilot teams. An example is the pilot team in Barcelona. They had a sort of alternative version of this emotion networking method. And this is also what we sort of practice in Amsterdam with Imagine IC, often with school children, with mixed group, that people position themselves in a room in relation to the object, and they have a conversation and positions change. There are many, many questions we can and insights we gain from this. And one of the interesting questions, of course, is how do we document this? And one of the ways how we can document is really that we make a report and keep the visualizations of this network. And how did people move in space? How did they move when they mind map their positions on a sheet of paper? We make reports, we share them. And as you can see, the language that is used is often the local language. And this is something also we can discuss. So sometimes it can be done in English, but you can also imagine that you adjust this method and use your local language, or not even a language, but use emojis, emoticons, instead of words. So there are all sort of different versions. The most important thing is that people are together, come together, and have a conversation. And this is also the way how Imagine IC, the partnering institution we work with in Centrinno, works with heritage on a daily level, that people come together, talk with each other, exchange stories, and these stories, of course, and the narrative and the experience that people share, either by emotion networking or when they convene during an event, these stories are very, very relevant, because they give another, sometimes a totally other view on heritage and how they feel about the site and what they expect the site to be in the future. So people come together, we collect different voices, different positions, and how do we work with these stories we hear from people and the stories that are exchanged during emotion networking sessions, that are collected during ethnographic fieldwork, during events, during exhibition visits. This is something that in Centrinno is very relevant to have from these 9 pilot sites, from a bottom-up perspective, all these different voices, and bring them together in, and that is now why the moment when I hand over to my colleague Jonathan Ebenzohar to tell a bit more about the living archive, because this is where the stories are collected and are also shared and will be shared publicly, online and offline in the future. So Jonathan, can you tell a bit more about the living archive?
Yes. Hi, 38 people that are carefully listening. Nice to meet you. This living archive kind of brings together in a not necessarily linear sequence the methods, and I'll just talk you through it. So what we've done with pilots is to sort of understand that the ethnographic fieldwork, the hanging around, the listening, the observing, is a first step. And it's a step that allows the pilots to understand what's going on, how to even start or engage in a conversation around these things. Pilots have then organized a motion networking session, which Hester just presented in terms of a method, each time trying to see who is in this conversation, who should more be in this conversation. And of course, as Hester noted, stories come up in these conversations. Pilots then collect or even curate these stories in a local living archive setting, which here it says offline, but it's not always offline. Some pilots have also created their own online, so local online living archive. And that is, of course, a place where the idea is that the people you have engaged in these conversations recognize the value attributed to the stories that they have shared. But what is really interesting, I think, for the Centrinno project is that we bring these stories together in a transnational living archive online, which we're still working on, and we will launch in the end of May, a public link, and then we'll keep making it better and nicer after May. And the key thing there is that we visualize these relations that the stories have to one another through a specific taxonomy of what is it that these former industrial site stories actually communicate, what forgotten aspects do they shed light on, and really understanding from the pilot's expertise that they think, okay, this story, and you will hear a couple of them in a moment, but that story holds value for me as I want to create a hub locally. So we've gathered those then in the Transnational Living Archive online for all to see. But then our work doesn't stop, because then we ask ourselves, based on the concepts you've just heard, with the sort of dynamic nature of heritage making, what do these relations actually tell us? So what are the insights and reflections we see emerging from these stories as they are connected across these 9 places? And by the way, it doesn't say so here, but we are building this infrastructure in a way that it will be open for other local projects, for other investigations to also contribute stories too. And in contrast with many of the digital humanities or digital heritage work out there, we really have chosen to focus on quality over quantity. So it's not about gathering millions of stories and millions of visual assets of former factories and so on. No, we take the time, we listen, we reflect, we curate, we bring together, we study the relations and we reflect on it. And at the end of the day, after we've done that, we may go outside again for ethnographic fieldwork and think, have we listened carefully enough? Or is there another item we need to look at?
Great.
Back to Esther.
Thank you. Then let me, because Jonathan, as Jonathan also said, reflection and the development of new insights, gaining new insight is very important in Centrinno. And for that reason, we also sometimes present our findings at international conferences, and we try to challenge ourselves really to reflect on what new ways of looking at heritage and working with the notion of heritage, what that could bring us. And on a recent conference, Harry Reddick shared this idea of what is the new insight we gain, what could be a new insight we gain when we connect the notion of heritage with the notion of waste. As you may remember from Flavio's introduction, in Centrinno, the whole idea of circularity and regeneration is very important. And the whole notion of things, items that might be considered as waste is important. And then it comes not only to sort of items of wood or iron, steel that are forgotten somewhere in a corner of this abandoned former industrial site, and that we can reuse to make new objects or have become more circular in our everyday behavior, making consumer goods. But we could also work with this notion of waste when it comes to forgotten stories, non-dominant narratives, silence communities. So there are multiple ways of connecting heritage and waste that really might sort of trigger our thinking, our way of thinking about, indeed, heritage and waste, about the past, how the past works in the present, how we can maybe things like wool, for example, that we considered as waste. Maybe this is an important item of heritage as well, with stories connected. So wool can become an item of heritage. And the way of thinking about waste as heritage can bring some new insights. And it also makes us think about, indeed, as I said, this forgotten, overlooked narrative, silence communities. And this, indeed, you may even call this way of connecting different concepts a way of working, an instrument, a tool. So that is why we listed it as ethnographic fieldwork, emotion networking, building a living archive from a bottom-up perspective, doing it really with the people on the side, and then trying to think in a sort of new manner about the different concepts that we really hope in the end that we reach our goal, namely that we can contribute to this desired sort of inclusive, sustainable future. And using heritage, using the past, or working with the past, I should say, towards the future in the present, giving the floor to these multi-voiced items, I would say, in the present. So let me stop here and give now the floor to two pilot teams to share with you some real experiences. How did it work out? What did we learn, and what were the challenges that we were confronted with, or we as CENTRINNO team. Let me first give the floor to Copenhagen, and then they will present for 10 minutes, and then Tallinn, the Tallinn team will take over. So it will be 20 more minutes of listening, and then we will have the coffee break. But just before the coffee break, I will be back for 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, to do a very brief wrap up and to introduce you to the next assignment. But that's for later. Now, welcome to the Copenhagen team.
Yes, hello everyone. Nice to see so many. We are the Copenhagen pilot team. My name is Stine, and I represent the municipality of Copenhagen.
And I am Cecilia Schulze. I come from the Danish Design Center, which is supporting the Copenhagen pilot.
Yes, Esther, can you please shift? And the agenda we have for you today is that first I would like to start by giving you some context on the transformation in Copenhagen and in the pilot area, just so you have an idea. And then Cecilia will present how we apply the tools in the pilot area with some concrete examples regarding emotion networking and the ethnographic fieldwork. Yes. And
yep.
Okay, so in Copenhagen, we are experiencing a significant population growth these years, and this creates a need to find and develop new areas in the city for housing. The urban development often takes place through conversion of rundown industrial and harbour areas into modern urban districts with a mix of new residential and commercial building. This leads to seeing heritage as a new arena of conflict, and we've seen several examples actually in Copenhagen of how the dilemma between the need to accommodate the many newcomers and preserving the city's cultural and industrial heritage creates friction. Yes, please, Hester. The pilot area in Copenhagen in Nordvest is a good example of this development. The neighborhood is unique in Copenhagen. It's a historic industrial area and an unusual melting pot of architectural contrast, of old buildings and creatives. And in recent years, there's been an increasing interest from developers to convert and demolish the old industrial and residential buildings to build new houses. And this trend challenges the industrial and cultural heritage and the distinctive environment. And we have a very concrete example for you, which is called Fuglereden, which is translated into the bird nest. And if you can change again, Hester, please. Fuglereden is located in the pilot area and is one of those historic buildings that was about to be demolished. And the demolition was actually prevented due to a strong citizen and local political mobilization. And this is an example of how heritage and emotion related to heritage can create both friction and connection between different groups of of people in a neighborhood. And actually the planned demolition became a symbol of a great interest in preserving the special cultural environment among the locals and the local committee. And the citizen mobilization led to a new conserving zoning plan in the area, where the CENTRINNO pilot applied emotion networking as a tool, which Cecilia will tell you more about now.
Great. All right. If you can, yeah, one more. Thank you, Hester. Yeah, so I'm gonna take you through some examples of how we've been applying some of the methods that that Hester was also presenting before. And as Stine mentioned, there was quite a momentum in our pilot area when we started out on the project, because there was already plans for creating or developing this conserving zoning plan in Nordvest. So, and we quite fast saw that there were some very nice synergies between the way of discussing emotions and emotions relating to heritage and place that was connecting to some of the conflicts that Stine was also telling about before, which this was one concrete example, but it's something that's been experienced many times before and around in the city. So people from the municipality and the people working specifically within this field was also quite interested in looking into what they could do to prevent these conflicts in the future. So the zoning plan, the goal of the zoning plan is to conserve some existing buildings and urban environments to maintain some of the value that is pointed out in this plan. And of course, we also saw this as a tool, as I said, that could be applied in other places of Copenhagen, but this was a good case for testing out in our pilot area. So they were working on and already in the middle of the work of pointing out some of the buildings that were worth preserving. Typically, they've experienced that the process was quite limited in order to give input from different kind of actors across the city. So they were also looking for new approaches for actually getting different views on what is worth saving and conserving in the different areas. So that was why we asked ourselves the question how we could be using emotion networking as a tool for democratizing the development of the conserving zoning plans even further. If you can, perfect. So we started out having a dialogue with the different people in the municipality who were working with this specific effort. And we started out by joining a meeting where they were, first of all, they were about to just present what was the plans going to be for the conserving zoning plan, but then we got a time slot for actually testing out the method and seeing whether we could also get some input for the plan and see how do the local actors participating in this meeting actually stand in this whole field. So what do they see as important in the area, and how can we discuss heritage and emotions in a new way to maybe also get some new perspectives and hopefully preventing some of these conflicts arising that we've seen as an example before. So we experienced by testing this, the tool was that it was a really good conversation starter. It initiated some very, very nice conversations and discussions around the local identity of the area, what was important to preserve, and how did it relate to heritage, and what do we really want to stand out also in the future. So it also helped creating some kind of awareness of the heritage and the local identity also going further. And it also became quite obvious to us that there was a really strong wish to also highlight some of the heritage of the area even more. So that's something that we've also been working on further on, but I will come back to that. So we saw that it worked quite well to kind of pinpoint some of the places and some of the buildings that were maybe on the tipping point, whether they were important enough to be preserved or to be part of the plan. Some showed that they were maybe not that important, and some of them actually turned out to be quite relevant to consider also going forward with the work of the plan. So we saw it also as a quite proactive tool. Now, in this case, we were maybe put into the process a bit further along the way that we could have wished for, but we saw really the potential for applying this method and getting these input quite early on in the process, also going further. So we also tried to identify where we should create ambassadors and create an ownership to this tool in order to actually make this process happen. So we made sure that that the involvement would happen early on in the process. And in Copenhagen, we have this thing called lokaludvalg, or local committees, that are anchored in local areas of the city. So we also started a collaboration with them in order to make them understand the value of this tool, and starting to also looking at how we could adapt this method in the best possible way for their kind of reality and the way that they were working. So the challenge was to start training them and getting their input, and that made us adjust the tools even more. We had some training sessions with them and produce this kit that they will be able to adopt and go teach, or actually go through these sessions themselves. And it ended up in a final zoning plan, and they preserved 98 buildings, and 36 of them had industrial heritage. So that was nice. I'll move quickly forward just to give a short overview of what we've also done within ethnographic fieldwork and the living archive. We've been working on collecting stories for the living archive through different interviews with the local stakeholders, both people living there, working there, to get a broad representation in the different identities and values and mindsets towards heritage and what should be preserved in the area. So that's feeding into the living archive. Then we've also been activating local students. There's a local vocational school in the area, so they're a quite important part of the heritage of the industrial heritage being carried forward in the area, and we would like to activate that more, making it even more visible. So they were creating this exhibition with photos and stories, so people actually become aware of the history that they're part of and that they're tuning into now. Then we've also created this local podwalk with conversations with different people who either live, work, or study in the area. So a range of people who also gives their view and perspective on the area, and also related to the industrial heritage and history. And then we've also been working on creating a local archive. So really also trying to be visible and be available at different contexts in the area. So we were at this local neighborhood day where we also started co-creating a local archive. So getting the people participating there's input for the area's identity and soul. What do they saw as crucial for the area? What made up Nordvest and the area from their perspective today, in order to also visualize and carry it forward. And hopefully all of this, now I'm wrapping up, hopefully all of this will be gathered in an exhibition where we actually create the local archive. We're collaborating with the local library. So our main goal is to gather all the stories collected and making them into an exhibition where we can highlight all of this good input, and hopefully also to making it interactive. So we will keep gathering stories and perspectives of the area. So we're developing that right now, and that's part of also the World Capital of Architecture, which Copenhagen is this year in 2023. And the last bit is the local bicycle route that's also created, also in relation to the World Capital of Architecture, which is a route where tourists and Copenhageners can bike around and see some of the industrial and cultural heritage in the area. So also to strengthen the awareness and knowledge about that this is actually the history of the area.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. And I'm afraid that we will skip 2 slides, but they will be in the PowerPoint. So because of the time, but now I wanted to give the floor to our next team, the Tallinn pilot team.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me nicely?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm Karin from Kopli 93 and also CENTRINNO pilot, which is located in Estonia, Tallinn. And what is different with our pilot compared to the Copenhagen pilot is that in addition to having the neighborhood that we are working at, we also have a specific building that is called Kopli 93. I'm gonna talk about it more later in the talk. Next slide, please. So first I have to mention that the Kopli 93 has been brought to life thanks to 2 projects. It was first initiated by CENTRINNO, but after that we launched another project with the local municipality and Estonian Environmental Investment Center to further develop the hub. And this is the reason why we were able to open the first public makerspace in Tallinn. Next slide. Tallinn is a city with quite a long history. So if you would Google Tallinn, then the most common or most popular thing that comes up is the story of the medieval town. But CENTRINNO is a project that focuses on the industrial culture layer, and that has not been researched too much here. And Kopli 93 is located in northern Tallinn, Kopli Peninsula. It is a small peninsula with about 6,000 people. And it was first and most industrialized region in Tallinn. It had many industries with factories, including shipyards, cotton plants, chemical industry, etc. Next slide. So in 1937, the city opened a new culture house in the middle of Kopli. It was meant to be an apolitical culture center for the local community. It was opened during the time that Estonia was independent for the first time. But unfortunately, not so many years after the opening, the Soviet Union military turned it into a closed sailors club for the military. So, and in addition to that, during the 85 years that this building has existed, it has also served as a school, as a propaganda house. There has been like different kind of schools working in there. And before CENTRINNO, for about 20 years, the building was empty and abandoned. And now it has been opened for 2 years. And thanks to everything that we have done there, it's now an experimentation and community center for local resilience and self-sufficiency. Next slide. So first we opened a community apiary, community garden in the territory. We use permaculture principles and techniques and also heritage to create the design and vision for the garden. And the garden was created as a bait for the local inhabitants to come to Kopli 93 to start building the community there. And one of the main strategies in building the community was first weekly work parties on Wednesday evenings called Working Wednesdays. So at 6 p.m., people gathered together to do something productive. We spent most of the time outdoors, and after COVID lockdowns, people were very eager to engage in anything social and anything that was outdoors. So in that sense, Kopli 93 is unique with its outdoor setting, and I think it's a very valuable leisure and recreation opportunity in the city. Next, please. So now the second thing we achieved was the community apiary. So we launched this project together with the stakeholders, the local vocational school and Beekeepers Association. And it has also turned out to be a quite popular thing that people experiment and watch and learn from. Next, please. And the highlight of last summer was the opening of the makerspace, which is the first community makerspace in Tallinn. The space was built during the summer and has now been open for about 6 months. And the space has already been proven to be very valuable and popular among the community and visitors. And weekly Working Wednesdays played a key role in building the space. The space was handed to us as a blank white canvas, and together with the community, week after week. We fixed old donated furniture. We made new furniture from salvaged materials, and that is the reason that the cost for the interior of the makerspace, this is an 80 square meter makerspace, so not too small. The cost was only 15 euros. And I think when we didn't have the volunteer work, it would have been like 1,000 times more expensive project. But now, because the makerspace is ready, can you go back for a second? Sorry, yeah. So, but because now the makerspace is ready and the garden also is ready, then we have introduced a new tradition called the monthly repair parties, because now Wednesdays are more for the private projects and just leisure time for people. Then now the repair parties are the main tool that we use to maintain the makerspace and develop it and have like community meetings as well. So traditions play a very important role in the work that we do. So next please, slide, yeah. So building a community in COP93 is an accomplishment on its own, and because those are the people who come together regularly to develop and build a space, to garden, to learn together, and to innovate the city. Next. So now I'm gonna talk about how we have used emotion networking in our work. For us, it has mainly served as a tool to build relationships, to find mutual understanding and common grounds. Next slide, please. The first emotion networking session that we did was with our own local CENTRINNO consortium. Let's be honest, we were also like a bunch of local stakeholders now trying to do a grassroots initiative or grassroots movement. But how do you form a grassroots activist team with professionals from the local municipality, from university, from the city in general? So I was the pilot coordinator, still am the pilot coordinator, but at first, to me, it seems that those people had nothing in common in that sense, and they didn't know much about Fab City Hubs, and I think they wouldn't even care that much about that. So for them, it seemed just another project. But then by accident or by supervision from the Rainward Academy, we started to practice emotion networking. And during the session, I quickly discovered that this is a tool to create a safe space for healthy vulnerability. So during the session, we managed to clear out some of our fears, misunderstandings, get to know each other much better, build trust and build like a common vision, because everyone had a tiny piece of a vision or a mission connected to the project. And thanks to that, we were able to connect all of those visions and put them all in together. And I think thanks to that, we also got every team member much more emotionally involved with COP93. So it just will not end up as another project that you're doing. So next, yeah. And I can truly say that the strangers that were then sitting behind the table made up just the sweetest and most trustworthy team that I have experienced working together with. So yeah, next please. And yeah, after that positive experience, we have exploited emotion networking on many levels. For example, we were also able to learn more about the situation of local craftspeople and entrepreneurs in Kople by having emotion networking sessions with them on touchy topics such as money or the commons. And I think any topic that can trigger conflict or negative feelings, I really recommend using emotion networking. It can be a team or like any kind of group of people, because it is a simple way to create a safe space that allows people to be honest or in a neutral way, because emotion networking welcomes positive feelings and negative feelings equally, because you have this urge to fill out the canvas, not to be like in one corner only. So that's why I think it's okay in an emotion networking session to talk about any kind of feeling, because it's on the canvas. Next slide. Yeah, and bonding and discussing over topics that relate to Kople and COP93 in general have opened a new space and for connection and understanding among the community as well. We have also learned new perspective from the way people from different stakeholder organizations see different topics by mixing COP93 community with stakeholders. And we can also see that bringing new light to the parts of history that have not been talked about much previously opens a new archaeological layer and discussion among the local community. This will also strengthen the relationships with the place by relating with the past. And we can really see the difference between the people who have been exposed to the heritage side of things and with the people who have not been. Yes, so thank you a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for these insights from the Copenhagen team, Tallinn team. Let me now very briefly wrap up. We have seen 2 pilot teams out of the 9 teams working in Centrinno in different manners. You could say maybe one more top-down versus bottom-up, but this is not really the case. I think in the end, it's a mixture of both. And that is really, that has been demonstrated that it's neither, it's too simple to say, oh yes, the one is working top down or the other bottom up. No, it's really a sort of collaboration. The ethnographic fieldwork that we introduced, and we have seen some glimpses, and we know that it's sort of based on fieldwork really being there. And we know that it can be quite challenging to go out, talk to people, but that is really the most sort of challenging thing, but also rewarding thing, to be around, to be on the side. Another thing that might be interesting to bring into the discussion also is how do we work with the physical traces and the intangible workings of the past in the present. So the intangible heritage and the tangible heritage, or items that could become heritage. How are they related, and how is it not only that we are talking about buildings, but we are working with physical traces, and then the stories come with that. So in the end, we have seen 2 examples of how heritage is made. And then I'm curious to hear also in a minute when we go in the breakout rooms to work and to discuss the presentations and the ideas, to also hear your ideas about how this combination of making heritage, curating the past, so to say, how that may relate to dealing with waste and the notion of waste. And we think that they go very well together, and that it helps talking about circularity and what the idea of what are people keeping and what not. One more thing maybe, and that is that I think that in Centrinno we are discussing also how we can sort of, while doing this project, get new insights on process of gentrification. And one of the challenging thoughts or findings maybe is that often working with the notion of heritage, making heritage, also can become part of a process or speed up, although we do not want it, processes of gentrification. So this is something also to keep reflecting on. And this is also why we thought it is so important to have this multi-voices approach to heritage, to really pay attention to acknowledge all the voices, the stories, the interests, knowledges that has been overlooked for so long, that we can give the floor to alternative voices and forgotten stories. So I hope that this gives you some idea of how we are working on this, and I really look forward to the next part where we work together in a mural board. Very briefly, we have soon the link in the chat, I think, to the mural board. You can tap on it, and then it brings you to one of the 3 breakout rooms, and there we will work in 2 sessions. First, 15 minutes on a couple of questions. We ask you to sort of take a position in how the things we have been sharing with you how they might be interesting for you as well. And then after the first 15 minutes, we have another session in the breakout room where we will try to make it a bit more practical and say, okay, if you are interested, for example, in working with emotion networking, what do you need? What would you need? So it will become, it's very simple, this exercise. Let's take a break now, a 10-minute break. Flavio, is that still, are we on schedule? 5 minutes?
We're just slightly in delay, but I think it was very important to hear all local experiences as well and to finalize the discussion. I suggest we take 5 minutes break now just to change, freshen up, and then so let's meet in 5 minutes directly in the breakout rooms, and we will slowly get to work together through our introduction and that's and the discussion. Hello, everybody.
And then we were cut.
We also cut in the middle of an interesting discussion, because for us it was really nice and to hear also other perspectives. So thanks all for participating in the breakout room sessions. It's a shame that we did not have more time, but I think we came to already some interesting thoughts and feedbacks and other experiences on how to deal with heritage, and especially through emotional networking compared to other methods. Maybe I can start sharing a few thoughts from breakout room 1. Also, Harry, if you want to complement or jump in, but we started to agreeing on the fact that heritage is a process in constant making, and therefore it is key to keep local stakeholders involved in this process throughout, and to see industrial heritage as a place of placemaking, because another important reflection that we went through is that sometimes heritage is seen as we are instructed about what it is. We are told what heritage is, but this drives a bit us far away from the fact that heritage is something to be constantly developed and to be made as the city progresses and urban development goes along. We also reflected on emotion networking and the fact that it is a good way, it can be a good way to engage a wider stakeholders that have different backgrounds and different interests, because with other experiences, other methods that are more structured, it is harder to get engagement, but also it is harder to get all relevant people involved. Whereas with emotion networking, which is much more based on really the emotions of place attachment, but also local knowledge that is available only locally, this allows for more perspectives to come into play at the same time and in a more informal way, where exchanges are favored than in more structured approaches. There were many other things to share, and many other interesting experiences from Japan, from Mexico, from Lisbon and Brazil. But I'll leave the floor to breakout room number 2, so you have the opportunity to share some thoughts. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Flavio. Yeah, we also thought that it was far too short to really go deep into a conversation, but I think there were some interesting, it was an interesting conversation in the sense that we started to talk about the challenges of this emotion networking as a multi-voiced approach to heritage. And it was one remark I think I take from it is that sometimes when you work with different power relations, it's also important to keep in mind that what are the voices that are not represented, who is not taking part in discussion, and also when it comes to sort of the voices of the past that are no longer here, and how is the past sort of still relevant, and how can we really take care that there is not an imbalance in the sense that maybe local communities that are very sort of strong in bringing their agendas to the fore, that also other voices are sort of silenced. So how to balance different voices, and then really make sure that they're all sort of get the floor. Then there was a very interesting sort of distinction between, on the one hand, the city in Mexico, Puebla, that is really heavily divided, and where a lot of people are not interested at all, or not sort of so much connected to the city where they live, or the part of the city where they live, on the one hand. And on the other hand, Copenhagen, where there are newcomers that are really curious to hear all these stories from the people that have been living there for a long time, and really want to sort of know all about the past. And so the differences in how people really want to become engaged with the city they live in. And there was this idea that maybe emotion networking could also help to better understand why this is the case, why people sometimes really relate to the city and sometimes not. So it may contribute, this method, to a better understanding. That is what I take from it, given all the challenges that are also there. Am I sort of, is this in 1-2 minutes to wrap up? Am I overlooking something, some voices? If not, I give the floor to Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah. In our group, I felt like a teacher in a room of extremely hardworking students, because they just worked through the Miro in deep silence and focus and concentration. It gave me the possibility to read occasionally what happened, but we actually perhaps started the actual conversation too late. So just as we were getting somewhere, we stopped. So maybe a lesson for the next focus group session, how to mechanically organize it. But maybe, generally speaking, we get validation, what we were looking for in a way. This approach to heritage is promising. The tool of emotion network is interesting. So I'm just focusing on 2 aspects that came up in that last conversation that are challenging. So one is that Remy, who works in Venice, explained, or at least put a little mirror, right? So in Centrinno, we had the luxury to experiment and to work and to try out, to collaborate without the concern, or without the with much less concern about the financial or limitations. So we had time to test. So yes, all these tools that we produce are brilliant, but to what extent are we making it in a way that others can actually use them who don't have big EU projects, or who, and what context is needed to allow that also. So it's not a problem we can solve, but it's a problem that we have to see, I guess. So and if we had more time, we would perhaps talk about, okay, is there a role for municipality? Is there a role for museums? Is there a role for other communities to pool resources or whatever? But that's, I think, one challenge that we face for these things to live on. And the other one is, I was happy in the sense to listen to experiences from a colleague in working, sorry, the name was new to me, Norman, my apologies if I am, Nerman from Mostar, divided societies, and heavily politically divided societies, where the history is very contested, sensitive, controversial, painful, difficult to discuss. I feel that listening to the experience from Tallinn, even though it wasn't presented in the plenary session, but there also is the issue of Estonian, Russian language divides and the representation of the past in the present in a political level. So I think that's another challenge that awaits us if this is to be used in other locations. Does Emotion Network in this approach to heritage actually bring people together in a way that they are, let's say, rehumanized across all sorts of divides, or is there more needed to enable that? Given the context that we work on the post-industrial legacies, I feel that talking about skills and something more universal, we all eat and live and are mobile and use stuff and make things, and there is something there that might be interested to explore further, whether talking about the embodied experience of industrial society in the past, present, and future is a way to approach contested histories from another angle. So that came up, but only like in half a minute. So I'm amplifying it a bit too much, perhaps, but that's from group 3. And if I missed anything, please do contribute, group members. Seems not.
So I think, yeah, also your last point, Jonathan, is very much relevant. It's something that came up also towards the end of our breakout room. So how to deal also with conflictual situations, also at neighborhood level. So in this case, you presented that possibly conflictual situations also on a more on a wider scale, but also conflicts at neighborhood level, how these emerge, and in emotional networking session, if it's a good way also to try and approach these conflicts, or if it gets exacerbated. So maybe, I don't know, it would be a good point to reflect upon. Also getting back at our pilot experiences, if we experience something similar. But unfortunately, we are running out of time for this time, but it's just the first time we meet for the focus group. So we have 4 more times with a slightly different focus, but I think we will have the chance to still maybe go back to these aspects, these methods, and to get deeper maybe into other specificities. But luckily we have more time to spend together and get more insights from you as well. So for today, I would suggest, well, no, first of all, I would like to thank you all for being here, and thanks all presenters from Centrinno side, which made this very, very interesting and insightful, but also thanks especially to all our experts that really helped us to not only to validate, but also to put some more seeds for reflection for us, and hopefully we'll get to a higher level also as well, thanks to your feedbacks. I'm getting a bit lost, but I've just seen that we propose a group picture. If you agree, and if you can, of course, turn on the camera, please do not hesitate, and let's try to make it as bigger as possible. Is anybody taking a group picture here?
I can't get everybody on the screen. So for me, it's okay. Someone with a big screen has to do it.
I'm trying with my big screen, but I cannot fit everybody into one. But I'll take 2. Maybe somebody who is a bit more techy than me managed to take 1 and all together. But otherwise, I think this. Now I have to save them.
I'm putting it on the Miro.
Okay.
So I have 1, and then I'll take the other as well.
Okay. No, Pietro also has taken a couple. And
it's okay.
But
it's
I think we can do a nice collage. Yeah, we can do bricolage with it, and that's it. So yeah, thanks again to everybody, It was an exciting first meeting, and we're looking forward for the 20th of April for our second gathering together. We will follow up with the agenda, more detailed information, and all the details by email, as it was the case for this time. As you may have noted already, we will focus more on social inclusion next time, and yeah, hopefully see you all there. And I wish you a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
For listening.
Thank you.
Participating.
Thanks a lot.